If you'd asked me a year ago what love looked like, I would have pointed to the deed of my house, the one I'd just signed over to my daughter, Clara. It was more than paper and ink. It was trust. It was everything I'd built with scraped knuckles and sleepless nights. The house had been in my name for over 30 years. It was where Clara took her first steps, where we weathered storms, both literal and otherwise, and where I spent the last nights of my husband's life holding his hand in the master bedroom as he slipped away. When I handed her the keys, it was with a smile and trembling fingers. "It's yours now," I told her, swallowing the lump in my throat. "For your future." She had tears in her eyes. "Mom, this means everything," she said, hugging me tightly. "I promise I'll take care of it just like you did." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. It had been Clara's idea. She said it would help her qualify for better financing, maybe even let her take out a loan to renovate the upstairs. I was getting older, and she wanted to lessen my burdens. That's how she phrased it. She made it sound noble, responsible, sensible. I should have seen the red flags. The first came in the form of her lawyer, a slick, too charming man named Wesley Hart. His suit was more expensive than anything I owned, and his grin was too smooth, too polished. When I asked for time to read over the documents, he chuckled like I'd told a joke. "Don't worry, Mrs. Lorne," he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. "It's just boilerplate stuff. Nothing to stress about." Clara added, "It's just a formality, Mom. We're family." That word family was always my weak spot. I should have taken the time. I should have had my own lawyer look it over. But I didn't want to seem ungrateful or mistrustful. I was already grieving the slow shift in our relationship. Clara had grown distant over the past year, more businesslike in tone, less affectionate. I chalked it up to adulthood, stress, the passing of her father. So I signed everything. It didn't feel like losing something at the time. It felt like giving. Like gifting a part of my soul, wrapped in shingles and brick and years of memories. But that night, something sat heavy in my chest. Clara left in a rush, saying she had to meet someone for dinner. She didn't invite me. She didn't even ask me to come over and celebrate. She just left, her heels clicking down the path I had laid with my own hands back when we could barely afford gravel. I wandered through the house, touching the walls like I was trying to memorize them. In the kitchen, I found a half-packed box of my late husband's cookbooks, the ones he used every Sunday. It was sitting by the back door, like someone had started to clean things out. When I asked Clara about it the next day, she said, "Oh, I just thought you might want to take them home with you, to your place." "My place?" I asked, confused. "This is my place," she laughed, but it wasn't the laugh I remembered. It was clipped, defensive. "Of course, I just meant, you've got your condo now, and I want to make some updates here. You said you didn't want to deal with renovations." I hadn't said that. Still, I let it go. The first week passed with awkward conversations and missed calls. Then came the second red flag. A letter addressed to Miss Clara Lorne, sole proprietor. The envelope was glossy and thick, marked urgent. It sat on the hall table, and I saw Clara tuck it into her purse like it was a prize. I asked her about it. "Just some home insurance stuff," she said without meeting my eyes. "Nothing important." Then, barely 2 weeks after signing, I came by to drop off some papers I'd left in the study. The locks were changed. I called her in a panic. No answer. When she finally called back, her tone was flat. "Mom, I didn't think you'd just drop by. We have to set boundaries now. It's not healthy to act like nothing's changed." "But it hasn't changed," I said, confused and angry. "This is still our house." There was a long pause. Then came her chilling reply. "No, Mom, it's mine now." That's when the first crack formed, a jagged tear in the fantasy I'd built around what this gesture meant. I thought I was giving her a legacy, but what I'd really given her was control, and I was about to find out just how far she'd go to keep it. It began like an itch, small, irritating, almost ignorable. One morning, I drove over to drop off a box of old photo albums Clara had once said she wanted. I still had a key, At least, I thought I did. But when I reached the front porch and slid it into the lock, the key wouldn't turn. I tried twice, then 3 more times. It stuck and then spun uselessly. I stepped back and stared at the door like it had betrayed me. When I called Clara, she answered on the second ring. "Mom, can we not do this right now?" "The locks," I said. "You changed them." There was a long pause. "Yeah, I did. It was for safety. You know how weird the neighborhood's been lately?" "Weird how?" I asked. "We've lived here 30 years. We know the neighbors by name." She sighed. "You're overreacting." Overreacting. That word hit like a slap. She promised to get me a spare key once things settled down. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe it was just safety. Maybe I was reading into things too much. I'd always been the type to second-guess myself before anyone else could. But the next week, I stopped by again. This time, I rang the doorbell. Clara answered in a bathrobe, looking surprised and annoyed, as if I'd barged in during a sacred ritual. "Mom," she said, stepping outside and shutting the door behind her. "You can't just show up like this anymore." "I brought your mail," I said quietly, holding out the envelopes. One of them had my name on it. "Addressed to me at this house." She looked at it, hesitated, then took it with a forced smile. "Thanks, but you really should call first. It's important we respect boundaries." There was that word again, boundaries. Once, it had been the warm fence that kept us close and safe. Now it was a wall she was building brick by brick, one cool conversation at a time. I returned to my small condo across town. 2 bedrooms, no backyard, too quiet. It had always been temporary. A place I retreated to after James died, when the house felt too full of memories. I never intended to stay long. I was always meant to return home. But home no longer felt like mine. The changes came quickly after that. My name was removed from the utilities. I couldn't access the alarm system. She stopped forwarding my mail. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "It's just easier this way," she said. No confusion. She said it with a smile, but her eyes were calculating. Then came the landscaping crew. I drove by one morning to see the old oak tree in the front yard, the one Clara used to climb when she was 6, being cut down. I pulled over, heart pounding, and marched to the front steps. "What are you doing?" I shouted to the foreman. "Tree removal," he said. We were told the roots were damaging the foundation. Clara stepped out of the house in a pair of designer heels, looking like she belonged in a glossy magazine. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "That tree's been here longer than you have," I said. She folded her arms. "It's a hazard. I made an executive decision." The word choice wasn't accidental. Executive. I stood on the sidewalk, watching as the tree came down branch by branch, the same way my place in her life was being dismantled. I could almost hear James's voice whispering, "You didn't see this coming, did you?" And he was right. I hadn't. Still, I kept trying. I called her 3 days later. No answer. I texted. No reply. I emailed. Nothing. When she finally did respond, it was a brief message. "Please respect my space. I'm trying to establish healthy independence. Let's talk next week. Love you." The final twist came when I visited the house again the following Saturday, hoping to drop off a box of my winter coats from the attic. I saw a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. A luxury SUV, black, spotless. As I approached the front porch, I paused. There were voices inside. Laughter. 2 of them. I was about to knock when I glanced through the sidelight window and froze. Sitting at the kitchen island, sipping wine, was a woman I hadn't seen in 20 years. A ghost. I thought I'd buried. My sister. Cassandra. She looked older, yes, but the same smug tilt to her head, the same manicured perfection. And Clara, my daughter, was laughing beside her like they'd been close forever. My hand trembled as I backed away. Cassandra, the same woman who'd disappeared after gutting our parents' estate, who'd left me to clean up the emotional wreckage and never looked back, was now in my kitchen, drinking wine from my glasses with the daughter I raised. And somehow, Clara had invited her in while locking me out. The house was no longer mine, but worse, it was no longer ours. It belonged to them now. And I was beginning to suspect that had been the plan all along. I don't know what I expected when I pulled into the driveway that morning. Closure, maybe. Or clarity. But I certainly didn't expect my name to be erased. As if I had never existed. The house looked the same at first glance. The hedges were trimmed, the porch swept clean. But the mailbox caught my eye. Where it once read Lorne, in neat bronze letters, there was now a slick new label. C. Lorne and C. Hartwell. I blinked. Hartwell. That name hadn't crossed my mind in decades. It didn't just sting, it burned. That was Cassandra's name. My sister. My ghost. I stepped closer, heart thudding. My name was gone, replaced. Wiped away like chalk in the rain. There wasn't even a trace of the old lettering. The new plate looked permanent, installed, with intent. It wasn't just a symbolic change, it was a declaration. You don't belong here anymore. I rang the bell, no answer. I knocked, once, twice, then reached for my phone to call Clara. It went straight to voicemail. Again, I circled to the back, hoping the old sliding door might still be unlocked, even though I knew it wouldn't be. As I reached the side gate, I heard laughter from inside. Familiar, casual, intimate. The kind of laughter you hear over shared secrets and expensive wine. Peeking through the curtainless kitchen window, I saw them, Clara and Cassandra, sitting at the table, sipping from my etched glass stemware. My husband had gifted those glasses to me on our 20th anniversary. They had been tucked away in a box labeled, "Sentimental, do not donate." I'd left that box in the attic. I stood frozen, trying to process the scene. Clara looked relaxed, her legs curled under her on the bar stool, laughing at something Cassandra had just said. Cassandra was barefoot, at home, draped in a robe that looked suspiciously like the one I used to wear. It wasn't just betrayal, it was invasion. My sister hadn't just come back. She had moved in. I drove home in a haze, every streetlight blurring into the next. My phone vibrated just once the entire ride. A text from Clara. "Please stop showing up unannounced. Cass is staying here for a while. Don't make this more uncomfortable than it already is." Cass. She called her Cass, a nickname only I used, back before everything between us shattered like cheap porcelain. That night, I pulled out an old storage bin from the closet in my condo. Inside were scrapbooks, old letters, deeds, and the remnants of a family I had tried for so long to preserve. That's when I saw the original title papers, the ones with my name on them. I held the old deed next to the photo of Clara I kept on my dresser, the one of her on her first day of high school, grinning, holding a lunchbox and wearing the same crooked braid I used to do for her every morning. I thought back to the moment I'd signed the house over. That hurried afternoon in Wesley Hart's office, Clara tapping her pen anxiously, Wesley talking too fast, brushing off my questions with legal jargon and plastic charm. "You're just formalizing what's already hers, Mrs. Lorne. She'll take care of it." It didn't feel like a transfer anymore. It felt like a setup. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office. I requested a copy of the new deed, already suspecting what I'd find, but even I wasn't prepared for the gut punch. The property now listed Clara Lorne and Cassandra Hartwell as co-owners. I stared at the paper as if it had the power to rewrite the past. Cassandra hadn't just returned. She had been gifted half the house, and she hadn't taken it by force. I had delivered it to her, tied up with a ribbon made of blind trust. I pressed my palms against the counter and tried to breathe. "Is there anything else you'd like to request, ma'am?" the clerk asked. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My world was spinning, but one truth stood tall amid the chaos. My daughter hadn't just betrayed me, she'd conspired with my estranged sister to erase me. Later that evening, I drove back to the house. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat across the street in silence, watching as Cassandra stepped onto the porch with a glass of wine in hand. She looked like she belonged there, like the house had always been hers. A neighbor walked by and waved. She smiled and waved back. They think she lives there, I thought. They think she's me. And maybe, in some twisted way, that was her plan all along, to step back into the life she left behind and take it from me piece by piece. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know what I was starting to remember, about the way my mother handled the estate, about the secrets buried deeper than the foundation of that house. They thought they'd locked me out, but I was still holding something. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't want to believe it, even after everything. The changed locks, the mailbox, the stranger now living in my house, I still clung to the desperate hope that my daughter hadn't meant to hurt me. That this was all some horrible misunderstanding, a temporary lapse in judgment she'd come to regret. I thought, this can be fixed, it has to be. So I confronted her. It was a Tuesday morning. I waited until I knew she'd be home. I didn't call, I didn't text, I just showed up. This time with purpose. I rang the doorbell, held my ground, and when she answered, I stepped forward before she could shut me out. "We need to talk," I said. Clara opened the door a few inches wider. Her eyes were tired, mascara smudged like she'd been crying. Or maybe she'd just stopped caring. "Mom, you can't just keep..." I walked past her into the foyer. Inside, the house smelled different. A citrusy perfume I didn't recognize lingered in the air. Cassandra's scent. I spotted a cashmere shawl slung over my favorite reading chair, a wine glass half full on the side table, a pair of designer boots by the stairs that definitely weren't Clara's. It was like I had walked into a parallel universe, one where I'd been replaced. "Are you seriously doing this?" Clara snapped, closing the door behind me. "Yes," I said, turning to face her, "because you owe me an explanation. Why is she here? Why is Cassandra living in this house?" Clara folded her arms across her chest. "She's my aunt. She has every right to be here. She forfeited that right when she took half our inheritance and disappeared. Maybe she left because she was treated like trash by this family," Clara shot back. "Did you ever think about that?" That hit like a gut punch. "Where is this coming from?" She hesitated, then crossed the room, picked up the wine glass, and emptied it in one gulp, like she needed strength. "Cass told me everything." The name again, Cass. Too casual, too familiar. "What exactly did she tell you?" I asked, the chill crawling into my voice. "That after Grandma died, you manipulated the will. That you convinced her to sign away her share of the estate so you could keep the house." I nearly laughed. "Is that what she said?" "She showed me the paperwork. She had a copy. It was all there." My knees went weak and I had to sit on the edge of the armrest. "Your aunt didn't sign away anything. Our mother included a clause that required both of us to agree on the house. Cassandra didn't want the responsibility. She wanted fast cash. And she walked away. No one forced her." Clara's expression hardened. "That's not what she remembers?" I stared at her, my own daughter, watching her twist and warp a truth she hadn't lived through. "And you believe her? After everything?" She turned her back to me. "She's been there for me in ways you haven't." The words landed like a slap. "I've always been there." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "You were busy holding everything together. For everyone. For Dad. For the house. For your perfect image of our family. You never noticed when I needed something different." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Cassandra. This was about Clara. Her disappointments, her unmet needs, the cracks I hadn't seen forming while I was too busy plastering the walls of our lives. But there was more. I could feel it. "Why give her part of the house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why her? Clara finally turned around. Because she's the only one who understands what I've been through. What it's like to feel like the outsider in your own family. And there it was. The betrayal, laid bare. I had tried to leave her a legacy. Instead, she'd rewritten it with the one person I trusted least. You planned this, I said. You and her. Together. She reached out to me 2 years ago, Clara admitted. At first it was just letters, then calls. She told me about her life, what she lost, what you kept from her. I started seeing things differently. She made me question everything I thought I knew. I shook my head. You don't know her, Clara. She's manipulating you. No, Clara said, her voice like stone. She's helping me take back what's mine. You think this house is yours? You don't even understand what it costs to keep it standing. I understand enough, she said. More than you ever gave me credit for. A silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I stood slowly, feeling as though my bones had turned to glass. You're not just letting her live here, I said. You're giving her everything. She didn't deny it. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. You may think you've won, I said quietly, but this house has secrets. And it remembers who it belongs to. I stepped out into the cold, the door clicking shut behind me like the end of a chapter. But this story wasn't over. They had drawn first blood. Now it was my turn. I never liked Wesley Hart. Even before everything, there was something about Clara's lawyer that made my skin itch. Too polished, too charming. His smile was practiced, his handshake cold. He was the kind of man who printed his initials on the cuff of his shirts and said things like, "Trust me," right before you absolutely shouldn't. But I did trust him. Because Clara did. And because when your daughter looks you in the eye and says, "It's just paperwork, Mom," you want to believe her. I remember the day I signed the deed over like it was etched into stone. It was raining, soft and steady, and I almost canceled. But Clara had insisted. He's cleared his whole afternoon. Let's just get it done. You can be home in time for dinner. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. Just a transfer, one generation to the next. I thought I was being generous, wise, setting her up with something I never had, a safety net, a place no one could take from her. What I didn't realize was that, in giving her everything, I was leaving myself with nothing. The real trap wasn't in the moment I handed over the keys. It was hidden in the language of the documents Wesley presented with casual confidence. Pages upon pages, flipped quickly, summarized in vague phrases like standard clause, default occupancy, and boilerplate protections. What I signed wasn't a gift. It was a surrender. I found that out 2 weeks after the confrontation with Clara. My hands were still trembling when I dialed the number of my late husband's old friend, an estate attorney named Richard Vale, a quiet man, meticulous and loyal. He'd helped us once after my mother's passing, and I had a feeling he'd kept the records others would rather forget. I sat across from him in his wood-paneled office, documents spread between us, my fingers tracing the printed lines that had become my undoing. Richard adjusted his glasses, squinting at the signature page. "Wesley Hart drafted this?" he asked, flipping to the addendum. "This clause here, this isn't standard." He tapped a paragraph I hadn't noticed the day I signed. It was buried beneath legalese, camouflaged to the untrained eye. But it was poison, pure and simple. Clause 14D, full relinquishment of rights. It outlined in explicit detail that I was not only transferring title, but forfeiting all future rights to the property, including visitation, residency, and any claim of informal equity or contribution. "What does it mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. "It means," Richard said gently, "you gave them everything. You didn't just sign over the house. You signed away your access, your history, your control, everything." I stared at the page. My signature looked foreign now, like someone else had scrawled it in my place. She told me it was a simple deed transfer. Richard exhaled slowly. This was a coordinated legal maneuver. Wesley's firm specializes in real estate asset restructuring. I'd bet money your daughter and sister spent months planning this. I leaned back in the chair, stunned. She said she needed my help. She said it would protect her future. Richard hesitated. I'll be honest, Lorne. This document doesn't just show legal overreach, it shows intentional deception. But proving coercion or fraud won't be easy. I stared at the walls of his office, lined with books, photographs of families who probably never had to face betrayal like this. I suddenly felt like I was drowning in someone else's life. Then something else occurred to me. If Cassandra's name is on the new deed, how is that possible? I never agreed to transfer it to her. Richard flipped through the papers again. She's listed as a secondary grantee. That means Clara had full authority to add her. Because of this clause, you gave up your approval rights. I could hardly breathe. So Clara had the right to give my house to my sister because I signed one line on a document I didn't understand? Yes, he said. Legally, she did. But ethically, this stinks of collusion. I left his office with a folder full of copies and a heart full of fire. If I had been naive before, I wasn't anymore. That night, I went online and searched everything I could about Wesley Hart. His name popped up on several property forums, some glowing, others full of quiet complaints about his aggressive tactics and client-favoring interpretation of elderly transfers. There was one thread in particular that caught my attention. Beware of Hart and Jensen. They manipulate deed transfers for asset shielding. My mother didn't realize she was signing away her occupancy rights until she was evicted. Evicted. That word curled around my stomach like a snake. I wasn't just being edged out of my life. I had been legally exiled from it. But here's the part they didn't see coming. They made one mistake. They underestimated what happens when you push someone who knows where the bodies are buried. And in my case, I knew the house better than anyone. I built it. I had saved every record, every blueprint, every version of every legal document, including one from an old will I hadn't thought about in years. The clause, the reversion clause. It had nothing to do with the new deed, but everything to do with the original intent of ownership. If I could prove that the transfer violated the conditions of that clause, I could turn the tide. Clara and Cassandra had the house for now. But they'd built their trap with rotten wood, and I was about to start hammering. The foundation of a house is supposed to hold everything together, but sometimes it holds secrets too. Quiet, unmoving things that stay buried until someone is bold or foolish enough to dig. And I was digging now. With Richard Vale's help, I combed through every legal document connected to the house. We opened old boxes I'd stored in the attic decades ago. Thick envelopes filled with deeds, wills, handwritten letters, and brittle newspaper clippings. What we found wasn't just paperwork. It was evidence of a story no one wanted told. The first hint came in a memo from my mother's estate lawyer, dated 3 days after her death. It referenced a sealed addendum to the will, never disclosed to Cassandra or me at the time. According to Richard, this was unusual. Sealed clauses are generally only used to avoid infighting, he said, or to hide something explosive. Explosive. That word set my pulse racing. Richard tracked down the original estate executor, a retired clerk now living in a care facility 2 towns over. His name was Bernard Tremblay, and when we visited him, he looked at me with weary eyes that still carried the weight of too many secrets. "You're Marie's daughter," he said slowly, "the older one." "Yes," I said. "Lorne, this is about the house." His gaze darkened. "That house, your mother knew it would tear you girls apart." "What do you mean?" he sighed. "Your mother included a secondary clause in the will, one she didn't want opened unless Cassandra came back." "Came back from where?" "From exile," he said flatly. "Your mother didn't want to admit it, but she cut your sister off entirely. The house, the savings, even her name from the cemetery plot. She said Cassandra had shamed the family." My heart seized. "What are you talking about?" Bernard closed his eyes. "There was a pregnancy, your sister was 17. The father was someone your mother considered beneath her." I stared at him, stunned. "I never knew any of this." You weren't meant to. Your mother paid for everything to be handled quietly, sent Cassandra away to a home for reform, told everyone she was traveling abroad. When she came back, the baby was gone, adopted out. And Cassandra wasn't the same. I sat frozen, piecing together the fragments. Cassandra's bitterness, her abrupt departure after our mother's funeral, the years of silence. Suddenly, it all made sense. She didn't leave for money, I murmured. She left because she was erased, Bernard nodded. And your mother sealed that addendum so Cassandra could never contest the will. Not unless she returned with proof of reformation. Employment, stability, sobriety. Sobriety? Was she? I stopped, not knowing how to ask. She struggled, he said. But she tried. Her letters were never answered. I was the only one who kept a copy of the clause. He handed me a file folder with a single page, yellowed with time. Typed at the top was, Addendum 9B, Provisional Reinstatement Rights, Cassandra Marie Hartley. It detailed that if Cassandra ever met the outlined criteria, the executor could petition for her to be added back into the estate, but only with my consent. Without it, the house remained solely mine. She needed your approval, Bernard said softly, and she never got it. But she had Clara. That's when the second revelation hit me like a wrecking ball. Cassandra had forged a return into the family, not through forgiveness, but through my daughter. Clara had known, maybe not all the details, but enough. Enough to invite Cassandra into my home, enough to help her rewrite the story. But here's the twist neither of them expected. Cassandra never qualified for reinstatement. Not officially, not legally. That clause, buried in a sealed file no one thought would surface, could nullify her entire claim on the house. She doesn't belong there, I whispered. No, Richard agreed. She never did. Not without your say. The next morning, I returned to the house, not to knock or plead, but to watch. I sat across the street in my car, binoculars in hand, like some bitter ghost haunting her own past. Around 10 a.m., a young woman arrived. Early 20s, blonde, familiar. She hugged Cassandra tightly at the door, then stepped inside like she belonged. I blinked. No, it couldn't be. I scoured social media that night, using the girl's image, running it through facial recognition tools and name associations. It took hours, but then I found her, Natalie Harper, college student, public blog, music major. And her last name? Harper. Not Hartley, but the same eyes. The same nose. Adopted? Maybe? I dug deeper. Found her adoption record. Half sealed. But enough to piece together. Cassandra's daughter. The baby she lost. The one our mother buried in silence. She was back, living in my house. It wasn't just a betrayal of property anymore. It was a blood reclamation. Cassandra hadn't returned to punish me. She'd returned to reclaim her child, her identity, and the house she believed was stolen from her. Only now, they were 3 against 1. But I still had the clause. And the truth. And that was stronger than any ghost in the walls. They wanted to rewrite the past. But I was the only one who remembered how it was built. In war, the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. That's what the reversion clause had become. A secret I had nearly forgotten, buried in a dusty filing cabinet in the garage alongside tax returns and warranty manuals. Back when my husband was alive, we'd met with an attorney to rewrite our wills. The house was central, our biggest asset, and my husband, cautious as ever, insisted on including a reversion clause. A safeguard, he called it. In case someone tries to misuse your generosity, he had said. I never thought I'd need it. And yet, there I was, standing in Richard Vale's office, holding a legal time bomb written in my own words, witnessed, notarized, and filed 2 decades ago. Clause 6C. Reversion of property rights in the event of fraud, duress, or misuse of gifted property. I read it again. And again. Until the letters blurred. It was airtight. If any recipient of the property, in this case Clara, was found to have misrepresented her intent or use the home in a way deemed harmful or deceptive to the original owner, me, the title could revert by legal petition. And the best part? It hadn't been revoked when I signed the new deed, because no one, not even Clara's slick lawyer, had thought to check my will. "This is your linchpin," Richard said. "We just need proof of deceptive intent." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Oh, I have more than proof. I have motive, witnesses, and a paper trail." Clara and Cassandra thought they'd won because they had a signed document, but documents are only as strong as their foundation. And this one had cracks. Big ones, starting with Cassandra's illegal occupancy and ending with the fact that Clara had knowingly misrepresented the terms of the transfer. Her lawyer had drawn up an agreement that overrode the original safeguards without my knowledge. "Doesn't that qualify as fraud?" I asked. Richard nodded. "It does, especially since the language was intentionally obscured." I spent the next week building my case. Every spare hour I had, I spent combing emails, texts, even voice messages, anything that showed Clara pushing me to sign the transfer quickly. One message stood out. "Let's just get this over with, Mom. The paperwork is standard. Wesley said there's nothing in there you need to worry about." I forwarded it to Richard. Then there was the letter I'd found in my attic, a handwritten note from Cassandra to Clara, postmarked 5 years ago. In it, she referred to the house as the first step in reclaiming what should have been mine. Proof, malicious intent, clear collusion. But I needed more. I needed something that would seal it. So I went back to the house, not to confront them, not yet. I went to see. It was Natalie who answered the door. She didn't recognize me at first. Her face was open, uncertain. "Can I help you?" "I knew your mother," I said softly, "back when she was young." Her eyes narrowed, but she let me speak. I told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to plant seeds. "She's not the villain they told you I was," I said. "She was hurt, but so was I." Natalie didn't say anything, just looked at me like she was trying to read between my words. When I left, she didn't close the door right away. She just stood there, thinking. The next morning, a package appeared on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it into my computer, hands trembling. Video files. Dozens. Hidden camera footage. Security recordings from inside the house. Clara and Cassandra, drinking wine, laughing. One clip chilled me to the bone. Clara, she actually believed it was just a deed transfer. Cassandra, of course she did. She still thinks wills mean something, like it's the 1960s. Clara, once I get the equity out, we'll list the place. You'll get your cut. Cassandra, and she'll get what she gave me? Nothing. I sat there in stunned silence. They weren't just using the house, they were planning to sell it, liquidate my legacy, and divide the spoils like looters picking through a battlefield. But now, I had more than suspicion. I had evidence. Natalie had given it to me, a silent witness, speaking louder than either of them ever could. That evening, I sent everything, every file, message, clip, to Richard. Within hours, he was drafting the petition to trigger the reversion clause. This is enough, he said. With this, we'll force mediation, and if they resist, we take it to court. I exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, I felt the ground shift under their feet instead of mine. The house hadn't turned its back on me. Not really. It had just been waiting for the right clause, the right timing, the right truth. And now, with everything in place, the battle was no longer for bricks and timber. It was for justice, the kind that starts quietly, like a clause no one sees coming, and ends with a door opening, not for them, but for me. A storm doesn't always begin with thunder. Sometimes it starts in silence, an uneasy pressure in the air, the sharp feeling that something is coming even if you can't yet see it. That's where we were now. The house still stood where it always had, majestic and immovable. But inside, a quiet war had begun, one they didn't know they were already losing. I kept my movements deliberate, no confrontation, no dramatics. Just letters sent to the right people, documents filed at the courthouse, and emails quietly dispatched to financial institutions requesting a freeze on any equity line associated with the house. Richard worked behind the scenes like a chess master, while I, outwardly, remained a ghost. But ghosts can rattle chains when they want to. I knew they were feeling it when Cassandra posted a cryptic message on her social media. Funny how people from the past claw their way back just when you finally start healing. Comments flooded in, friends, enablers, co-conspirators, all echoing sympathy. But one line stood out. "She'll never stop, you'll have to push harder." The same night, Clara texted me for the first time in weeks. "Mom, please don't make things worse than they already are. We're just trying to move on." Move on? From what? My life? I didn't reply. They were panicking, and it was showing. Natalie, meanwhile, remained silent. Not a word since sending the footage. But her quiet made sense now. She wasn't just Cassandra's daughter. She was the eye of their hurricane. The one who could still choose which legacy to believe. Hers or mine. Richard filed the reversion petition on a Wednesday. By Friday, Cassandra and Clara received notices of the motion and its hearing date. That's when the real cracks started showing. That weekend, the neighbors told me they saw Clara pacing the front lawn in a robe, on the phone, yelling into the night. The words fraud and manipulated and "I told you to shred those letters" floated out into the dark. So I turned the pressure up another notch. I had Richard subpoena Clara's attorney, Wesley Tanner, the same man who'd simplified the transfer deed and omitted the safeguards. I wanted to see his reaction when the clause was presented in court, but I had a suspicion. He hadn't told Clara everything. Because if he had, she would have burned that will before I ever had the chance to read it. I was right. He called Richard within hours of receiving the summons. Not to argue, but to negotiate. "Surely we can come to an agreement," he said. "This whole thing seems excessive." But Richard smiled and said, "It's only excessive if you thought she was weak." When Wesley relayed that call to Clara, she must have realized the facade was collapsing. Because the next night, someone broke into my storage unit. They weren't subtle. The lock was pried clean off, boxes upturned. But nothing was taken. They were looking for something. The original will. The copy of the clause. Any leverage I might have. But I was ahead of them. I'd already scanned everything and handed over the originals to Richard, who had them stored in an evidence vault under lock and surveillance. Still, their desperation was telling. And the moment I saw the unit violated, I knew something else. They were scared of what I had left. So I gave them more to fear. The following morning, I delivered a printed transcript of the video footage directly to Cassandra, sealed in an envelope, hand-delivered by courier to the front door of my own house. She opened it on the porch. The neighbor across the street caught the moment with a camera phone, Cassandra reading the transcript, going pale, clutching the doorframe. Then Clara came running outside and yanked her back in. They knew now that the walls were listening, that the house wasn't just bricks and betrayal, it had become evidence. From that day forward, they started watching each other. Every camera angle in the house was adjusted. The blinds stayed closed. Deliveries became frequent. Documents, boxes, and envelopes that never used to arrive. Paranoia was setting in. Cassandra posted less. Clara stopped showing up to work for a few days. The lawn, once manicured, started browning at the edges. The home they stole was fraying under the weight of the truth. And I kept walking by. Calm, silent, smiling. I knew that they were imploding from the inside, that the bond they forged out of resentment couldn't hold under pressure. They had united not because they loved each other, but because they hated me. But hate isn't glue. It's acid. Eventually, it corrodes. By the time mediation day arrived, they wouldn't be a team anymore. They'd be two drowning women clinging to the same broken plank. And I would be standing on shore, holding the deed they thought they'd stolen for good. They called it a mediation, but everyone knew it was a battlefield dressed in polite clothing. The conference room was cold and clinical, but tension crackled like static. Clara sat at one end of the long table, rigid in a beige blazer, lips tight. Cassandra lounged beside her, all affected ease, until you looked closer and saw the nervous tapping of her fingers beneath the table. On my side sat Richard, calm and composed, a folder in front of him like a sword waiting to be drawn. Across from us was the mediator, a woman in gray with eyes that flickered like a human lie detector. She offered the usual platitudes. "We're here to resolve this amicably," and "this is a safe space for dialogue." But dialogue was the last thing anyone here wanted. Clara and Cassandra came to win. I came to end it. The mediator began with a review of the petition, the reversion clause triggered by misrepresentation and fraudulent occupancy. Clara stiffened when Richard slid the original will across the table. "This clause was filed and notarized in 2004, Richard said. "It was never revoked. It holds as a binding condition over the title." "I had no knowledge of that clause," Clara snapped. "How could I have misrepresented something I didn't know existed?" Richard smiled. "You didn't need to know it existed. Your deception wasn't about the clause. It was about your intent." He opened another folder. Emails, messages, the infamous voice recording where she'd said, "Let's just get this over with. Mom, there's nothing you need to worry about." The mediator raised an eyebrow. "Miss Clark, were you aware your mother had not been fully informed of the occupancy restrictions in the transfer deed?" Clara glanced at her lawyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I trusted my attorney," she said. "He told me it was standard." "Then your attorney misled both of you," Richard countered, "which is yet another legal fault." But it gets worse. He played the video. The audio echoed through the room. Clara and Cassandra, laughing, conspiring, mocking me. She actually believed it was just a deed transfer. "Once I get the equity out, we'll list the place. You'll get your cut." And she'll get what she gave me. Nothing. Cassandra shot out of her chair. "That was a private conversation." Richard didn't flinch. "It was captured by a legal resident of the home? You forfeited any expectation of privacy when you participated in fraudulent activity." The mediator turned to Clara. "Do you have anything to say in response to these recordings?" She looked at me then, not with defiance, but with something closer to fear, or perhaps recognition. The realization that this was the moment everything turned. "She manipulated me," Clara said suddenly, pointing at Cassandra. "She filled my head with lies about my childhood, about the will. I thought I was protecting what was ours." Cassandra recoiled. "You wanted this as much as I did. Only because you said she didn't care about us, that she forced you out. You never said it was your own doing. My mother exiled me." "She gave you a second chance," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "And you burned it." The mediator tried to regain control, but the damage was done. The alliance between Clara and Cassandra was imploding, publicly, painfully. It turned out Cassandra had lied to Clara for years, claiming I'd disinherited her out of spite. She conveniently omitted the part where she'd forged a check from my father's estate and disappeared across the country. Clara had believed every word, because she wanted to believe I had failed her too. It gave her a reason to act. It gave her a reason to betray me. But now, with all the truth out in the open, there were no more reasons. Just consequences. "I have no choice but to recommend full reversion of the property to the petitioner," the mediator said, stacking the evidence. "In addition, I believe criminal charges may be forthcoming pending review." Clara didn't argue. Her face was blank now. Beyond anger, beyond denial, just stunned silence. Cassandra, on the other hand, exploded. "You can't do this to me again," she screamed, lunging forward before a security guard intervened. "You took everything the first time. I won't let you." "You gave it away," I said coldly, "just like you gave away your second chance." The room emptied slowly after that. Richard gathered our documents with precision, and I stood, not triumphant but solid. Rooted. Clara didn't say goodbye. Cassandra cursed all the way to the elevator. I didn't follow. Outside, the air felt different. The burden was gone, the battle was over, and I had won, not through rage or revenge, but by remembering who I was, a woman who built a life, a home, and a legacy with her own hands. And when it was threatened, I fought, not with fists, but with truth. The fall of the house wasn't mine, it was theirs. I stood in front of the house that had once been mine in every way, my name on the deed, my touch in every brick, my heart in every corner, and for the first time in months I had the key, the real key. Not a temporary copy or a court-granted access order. This one gleamed in the sun like it knew the war was over and the rightful owner had returned. The driveway was empty now. Clara and Cassandra had been given 72 hours to vacate after the court's ruling. They didn't protest. They didn't even look back. Cassandra had left behind a shattered wine glass and an ashtray full of unfinished cigarettes. Claire had taken the family photos off the walls, but not before slashing one of them down the middle with a box cutter. It was a picture of her and me at the beach. She'd cut it clean through the middle, separating our hands as if to make it final. But it wasn't final. Not for me. Because when I pushed open the front door, I didn't feel pain. I felt power. The air inside smelled faintly of lavender and scorched bitterness. The silence wasn't hollow. It was cleansing. As I stepped into the foyer, my footsteps echoed, as if the house itself was sighing in relief. Its true inhabitant had come home. I made my way through the rooms. The kitchen still bore the ceramic backsplash I installed myself, piece by piece. They'd changed the paint, covered the floors with rugs to match their taste, but underneath, the foundation was still mine. In the living room, a stack of unopened mail sat on the mantel. Bank statements, lawsuit threats. One from Cassandra's ex-husband demanding repayment of a loan she'd secretly leveraged against the house. I left them where they were. Let the ghosts of their lies follow them now. I found something else, too. Tucked inside the old cabinet I once used to store emergency candles. A notebook, Clara's. It wasn't full of venom, it wasn't even full of plans. It was full of doubt. Sometimes I think she was right about Cassandra. But it's too late to back down. What if I ruined everything over a lie I needed to believe? She trusted me, I didn't deserve it. I closed the notebook and slid it into my purse. Not as ammunition, not as evidence, but as a reminder that Clara, beneath all her betrayal, was still human. Still my daughter. That didn't mean she was welcome back, but it meant healing wasn't impossible. Later that afternoon, Richard dropped by to hand me the final paperwork. "It's official," he said, laying the documents on the dining table. "Title restored, equity frozen, liens canceled. You own this place. Clean." "Again," I said. "No," he corrected gently. "Still, you still own it. They just tried to forget that." He left soon after, giving me space. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the house in gold, I walked out onto the front porch with a cup of tea, just like I used to, and that's when I saw her. Natalie. She stood across the street, hands in her pockets, head low. When she noticed me, she gave a small wave. I waved back. She crossed slowly, uncertain, until she stood at the base of the porch steps. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know everything, I just believed her." I nodded. "You weren't the only one." She hesitated. "She said you'd kick her out of your life, that you'd never forgive her." I sipped my tea. "Maybe I won't, but that's her doing, not mine." Natalie looked around. "You gonna stay here? After everything? This house is mine," I said simply. "It was never the problem." She nodded and turned to go. But before she left, she added, "For what it's worth, I think you won." After she left, I walked back inside and did something simple, something no court order could replicate. I went to the closet, pulled out a hammer and a few nails, and rehung that beach photo, the one Clara had torn. I didn't tape it. I didn't try to hide the cut. I framed the damage. Because this house, like me, had been split open, but now it stood whole. And as I locked the door behind me, I smiled, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my story, no longer erased or exiled or excluded. I wasn't just the owner of the house, I was the author of its next chapter, and this time, the front door stays open, on my terms.